Hello, and welcome to Insightful Conversations with your host, 3 Principles practitioner, Del Adey-Jones. Join her each week as she welcomes some of the world's leading 3 Principles teachers and practitioners who share how this understanding has dramatically improved the quality of their lives and the lives of those they work with.
I'm so thrilled to have Lyn McCright with us today. Lyn is the founder of the online Advanced Holistic Health Coaching Program for licensed health professionals and nurses. It opened on 3 continents 3 years ago. Lyn first came across the principles when she met Sydney Banks back in 1980. Shortly after that, she began coaching and teaching the principles in her own private practice of nursing in California. Lyn is a health and wellness nurse coach, nurse practitioner, and a specialist in community health. She has recently opened Lyn McCright Consulting and Executive Nurse Coaching. Welcome, Lyn, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you.
That's wonderful. So the obvious question, how did you first come across the principles?
Well, I was one of the lucky ones. I had the opportunity to actually be introduced to Sydney Banks by Dr. Keith Blevins. So that was the very beginning. We happened to be at the Mailman Center in Miami at the VA hospital, and we had a huge auditorium filled with about 400 people at that event. And every word that Sid spoke, I knew was true. And I just was in awe of how direct and simple everything that he said was. So just a few months later, there was what has become known as the first conference, and I attended, and I was just shocked that there were fewer than 20 people in the room. Wow. After that huge auditorium filled with 400, I knew that not everyone had heard what I heard when Sid spoke.
Wow. So that's incredible because, either people say they got it like the first time something just went, oh my God, they had that epiphany. And then there's others of us, like me, that it just took a little longer, I had a few more, like I call them the buts, but does it apply here? Does it apply there? But clearly it really, really impacted you. So how did you take that? You were a nurse at the time. How did you take that back into your profession? What takeaway did you have?
Well, it was interesting. For me, there was no other alternative. I simply saw directly that it was completely applicable to nursing. So I was one of the few people at that time who was in private practice as a nurse. And it just so happened that what I was sharing was the principles. And with my background in the community as community health, I simply started wherever I had an opening. So I worked with business community groups like Kiwanis and the Chamber of Commerce. I saw patients privately, even the healthcare community were my patients. I saw people in larger groups. I spoke to an outpatient mental health center, both the patients and the staff in the same room at the same time. I worked with Robert Cosson, who was well known to a lot of us, and he and I worked with a large industrial firm that was having on-site job accidents. Wow. We also did weekend workshops at the Carmel Community Center, and every place that I turned, it was the right place at the right time. I had an opportunity to teach at the community college locally, and I also had an opportunity to do a small research project.
Wow, and you were doing this all, you started this back in the, right after meeting Sid? So.
I did. Well, it was actually in 1986. So when I met Sid in 1980, nothing had been written yet. Right, yeah. Not even his first book had come out. So it was only through hearing what he said that we were moving forward with. And I did attend a little training that Robert Cosson and George Pransky did for us in Santa Clara, and brought a friend with me there. And she and I are back together again now, working with nurse practitioners. So things have come around. My husband was active duty military at the time, so very shortly after I opened my practice, just 12 months later, I found myself halfway around the world in Korea.
Wow.
So it wasn't a very long time in my private practice, but as a public health person, of course, my study is cultures and communities. So I love to travel and am always endlessly fascinated by the variation in human beings.
Yeah.
In fact, I had the opportunity to talk with a couple in Italy yesterday who are putting together a conference there for the principals.
Beautiful, wonderful. Now, what areas would you say that you saw immediate results when you shared this understanding in your coaching profession, and rather in your nursing profession, and then onto your coaching?
Right. Well, I've always been really guided by the work of Florence Nightingale. She was, of course, the first nurse. And in the preface of her book, the Notes on Nursing, What It Is and What It Is Not, she wrote that knowledge of nursing is knowledge that all of us should have of how to put a body into a state of health. And
beautiful.
so in my work, we saw that we were simply recreating that vision of that Florence Nightingale had of our profession. And it gives us now an opportunity to create again what we're doing professionally. When Dr. Keith Blevins came to Texas in the fall of 2015, we were putting on the 5th annual Texas Regional Holistic Nursing Conference, and he brought with him the implications, not applications. Well, that really is what has made it possible for me to do now what I started to do 30 years ago. Because through the implications, I can teach through logic that which can only be understood through an insight.
So give us I love real examples. Give me an example of a patient that you had maybe that was struggling, and then when you had this understanding, how you were able to help them.
Well, I think I'll share with you first the vision that I had when Dr. Blevins came to Texas. And what I saw from the podium that day was that I felt like Florence Nightingale standing on a cliff. And what I was looking at down below was not the broken soldiers and horses, but our broken healthcare system. And what I knew in that moment was that with this new area called nurse coaching and health coaching, we can now move forward to change completely the institution of healthcare. It will be totally transformed. So for myself, one of the very first opportunities that I had when I was being coached, my coach, we were coaching on Zoom just like this, and he came in late and he was apologizing, running in out of the rain, and I didn't know what I was going to ask him about. And then I realized, well, time has been an issue for me also, and I haven't always been timely. So as we spoke, I felt something shift in my chest, but I could not identify what it was. And then the next morning when I woke up, I had no thought. I was not worried about being late. I was not worried about was I going to get there on time. It was so different for me. Because I had always judged myself harshly and jumped into the future saying, oh, Lyn, you're going to be late again. And all of these distracting thoughts were what was getting in my way of preparing myself for my day. So I saw that. And at the time, I didn't even have the words for it. I called it something about having seen something about time.
Mm.
Time is completely artificial. There is no time except for the present moment. Even when the future arrives, it arrives and we experience it as the
In the
now.
present, yeah.
So what happened for me was revealed when I mentioned it to Dr. Blevins, and he said, "Oh, Lyn, what you saw was not time; it was thought."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so ever since that time, it's been possible for me to realize, to observe myself as this thinker,
Mm-hmm.
and know that I don't have to criticize, analyze, judge, jump into the future with anxiety, go back into the past ruminating about what happened when, that
Mm.
I can simply move through my day directly. And that's where my understanding of thought was really realized.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I love that. And I love what you shared earlier when you mentioned the Florence Nightingale just looking over and not seeing broken bodies and, horses maimed and things, but really that it's the system that's broken, not people. As we know that we all have that innate health and that resilience within us. And it's just as you pointed to, it's our thinking that can slow us down and stress us out and not have us be fully present in the present moment. So, yeah.
And when Sydney Banks told us that psychology and psychiatry would be the two most healing venues on the planet, I totally understand that, because in all of healthcare, we all use psychology. There's not any healthcare field that does not. And because of the numbers, just for example, in the United States today, there are about 1 million physicians,
Wow.
but there are 4 million nurses.
Yeah.
So there are 4 times as many nurses practicing. And just because of the sheer numbers, and the fact that we work 24/7, 365, nurses actually touch more people's lives than any other profession.
Yeah. That's really mind-blowing. I mean, when you put it like that, it really is. So talk about this online program you have, that and where the inspiration came for it, where you had that vision to do this, because I mean it's unbelievable what we can achieve these days with the internet and things like that. So share about the program you have and how it reaches so many people.
We had just heard from the American Nurses Association. I attended a leadership conference in Texas, and the American Nurses Association came and told us that the average length of patient stay in the hospital today in the US is only 4.5 hours.
Wow.
Well, that is a huge difference. When I was in school, it was 5 to 7 days, 24-hour days. Now it's less than half of an 8-hour day. So we are at the point of having to redefine who we are and what we do in nursing. And fortunately, I have been volunteering for the Holistic Nursing Association, and they had only just recently, within the last 2 years, put in place a national board certification in coaching. So what I saw when I stood at that podium when Dr. Blevins came to the Holistic Nursing Conference in Texas, that vision of the broken healthcare system, I saw that putting the principles together with nurse coaching is how we would move forward in redefining our professional work. Because if the patients are not in the hospitals, the nurses won't be there either.
Yeah. Talk about the program. So people in all forms of the healthcare profession come to you for coaching. Is that right? I mean, you have.
Oh yes, we're really privileged in that we can offer 2 certificates. One is for nurses, and the other is for all other licensed health professionals. And the nurses can go on and sit for a national certification exam. Actually, nursing is the very first profession to offer a national board certification in coaching. No other profession is doing that yet.
Yeah.
And because we have a parallel program now, it's for the licensed health professionals, and that could be anybody from a physician to a psychologist to an occupational therapist to a speech therapist. It could be a licensed vocational nurse, any category, a physical therapist, any category of health care provider who is licensed is eligible to come to our school for a certificate as a health coach through advancing holistic health.
That's beautiful. I really, I mean, it used to be sort of that the bedside manner was highly rated in the health profession, whether it was doctors or nurses. And then I think from what I've read anyway, then it was sort of academia. The emphasis was put on the sciences and less on the personal nature of your relationship with your patient. And I'm just seeing that this is so beautiful because, part of nursing isn't just to heal the physical, help heal the physical body, but the emotional, psychological as well. And the fact that they have the principles for not only to support themselves, but in turn their patients, it's beautiful.
Well, yeah, I mean, right now with the way that the healthcare is situated, we have one physician a day in the U.S. that is committing suicide.
Oh my goodness.
And they weren't even keeping track of the number of nurses until about 18 months ago. They began. So we are supposed to be the helpers, the ones that people turn to when they're in trouble, and we can't even help ourselves. So the situation is such that really the most important thing in my eyes right now is to bring this to the profession. And then through the professions, we can bring this to the public.
Yeah.
It seems to me that just the sheer numbers of psychologists and psychiatrists that are out there, and they spend an hour or so with each patient, we'll have the opportunities to see many more patients when we're including all of the health professionals in the principles.
Yeah, it's just, that image of, the oxygen mask on yourself first and you in turn then can help others.
It is.
Yeah,
it
definitely.
is exactly that way.
And also to keep people in the profession, helping profession, because I know so many people burn out and they just can't sustain.
So what are the numbers? I live in Texas, and as recently as 3 years ago, they did a study of all of the 215 schools of nursing in Texas. And they were looking at the graduates from the previous 5 years to see how long they stayed in the profession. The average length of stay in the profession was 1.5 years.
Wow. All that training, all
after
that
all
money.
Yeah, 2 years to 4 years of schooling, and then just to leave before they even got their first relicensure.
Yeah, that's tragic. That's a huge number. I had no idea it was that big. So you've been doing this now it's been 3 years. You say 3 continents. Where are the other continents you're on?
Well, we were fortunate to have a student in Japan, so we opened in Asia. We had a student in Norway, so that was Europe, and then we had students all across the U.S. We have a student in Canada now, so we just don't know. There are no limits.
Yes, absolutely.
Where we can go, and we knew that when we set this program up. That's why our school is online.
Exactly.
And we do include live coaching calls, so we offer those on a weekly basis, and that's how we stay connected and learn to coach each other. But it's been such a joy to see when I work with a profession that works all around the clock and rotating shifts and so forth. I wanted them to be able to come to our school and not be bound by having to travel or have a babysitter or the fact that they had a different schedule at work now. I didn't want any of those things to be a limitation.
Yeah, that is the beauty of the internet. It's global and it can be in whatever time zone you're in, if you can work it out. That's incredible. Now, I know you also the 3PGC Global Nursing and Health Professional Calls. Now, tell us a little bit about that.
Oh my goodness. Well, since, of course, the psychologists were the first people that came, and they went to Salt Spring Island to meet Sydney Banks. But there were a group of nurses that were working in the intensive care unit in Miami, and they were some of the first students that came to the program that Roger Mills started with the Institute of Innate Health. And I was fortunate to be able to fly down from Texas to join them there. And I actually was in school. The very first 2-week class that I had was with Chris Heath.
Oh,
so she and I were there together. And I got to meet all of the nurses from the ICU, and their vision was so clear. One of them went directly into health psych nursing without any previous experience or additional education. And they just found themselves outside of the intensive care unit working in other areas. But at any rate, Karen Miller Williams was one of those people. And she and I came together 4 years ago. We're just celebrating our 4th anniversary of starting the Nursing and Health Professions Community of Interest for the 3 principles. And we meet on a every other week basis. And we have a global Zoom call. So we've been joined from people as far away as South Africa.
Wow. So tell us a little bit more about that. So those are not necessarily the people that are taking your program. These are just nurses and health professionals from all over the globe that can just call in twice a month and share, and what they're going through, and get support and community. Is that correct?
That's it. That's it. When I first started, one of our advisors said, "Well, you don't need support. You are the supporters." And I said, "We need support."
Exactly.
Basically, the way that it works is we have one daytime call that starts at 10 a.m. Pacific, and then the other evening call that starts at 5 p.m. Pacific. So that then during the daytime call, the people in Europe are available after their dinner hour. So it works, I think, really quite well that way.
I think that works great. And is that a free join by Zoom? And
yes, it is. They just have to join 3pgc.org first. Just put your name and email on the bottom of the page, and then send me an email to sign up with our group. And right now we have about 140 people who have joined.
That's
and
great.
We provided actually a wonderful pre-conference in 2016 when it was held in Los Angeles, and that was something that Dr. Blevins and Dr. Joe Bailey did for us together. It was called Transforming the Epidemic of Burnout, Awakening the Innate Resilience of Healers.
Oh, I love that.
That was the pre-conference that they did for us.
Yeah, we should do another one next time we have it in Manhattan Beach. That sounds wonderful, because that is, like you say, those numbers that you were sharing earlier, that's shocking. That's so sad that somebody, goes, as you said, invests all this time in their schooling, and that's their passion, and yet they, they don't. They burn out, and they don't look for or get the support they need to stay in that profession. So,
the state licensure boards are really responsible for the health of the public. That's the reason that health professionals are licensed. And basically, with that level of burnout, we have a system that's not sustainable.
Absolutely. Now, is this part of this is part of the volunteering you do at the 3P GC conference and things? Because I know that it's for continued education that people take this as well. So explain a bit more about that too.
Well, for licensed health professionals, almost every state requires continuing education. And so I've become a provider of continuing education through the Board of Nursing State of California. So a lot of health professions beyond just nursing can use our CEs, our continuing education credits, for their relicensure in their area. I know in Texas, vocational nurses and we have been told that occupational therapists and physical therapists can use nursing CEs. So it varies by state who can use CEs from nursing, but many health professions can.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So people would just contact you directly, and you could on your website, we'll put your website up and everything, how they can contact you, and they can find out whether that classifies as continued education in their particular profession, depending on the state.
Yeah, they'll have to call their licensing board to find out.
Okay, wonderful. So
that it qualifies in Texas.
Yeah. So where do you see all this going? What's your vision moving forward?
Well, it's absolutely huge.
Yeah, that's great.
I just had the opportunity to start a collaboration of all of the schools of nurse coaching, and there are only 5 right now. And what we find is that no institution has ever been at the root of grass level change. So all of nurse coaching now is only coming through private schools, and currently only 5 of them. Now, there are some doctorate programs that have incorporated nurse coaching into their curriculum. 3 universities have. But the leading edge of where the profession is going is coming through continuing education, not academia.
Yeah. That's wonderful. And that's your vision. I love it.
Well, yeah, it is. And what I see is that all of the schools of coaching will be offering the principles.
Yeah.
That will be our reason for being in the world.
I love that. That's a beautiful, beautiful note to end on. So again, thank you so much. I loved meeting you today and talking with you, and you sharing your journey with us and where it's going. And I look forward to hearing more from you.
Oh my goodness, Del. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, our pleasure. Thank you.